Wicked cool. Feature alert.
Hey there, podcast fans. Thanks for listening. Now, you can also reach out and send me a text message. On every episode, at the top of the show notes, you'll see a link that says, send us a text message. Simply click it, write something super nice and sweet, and away we go. Also remember to please subscribe, share this podcast with a friend by telling them about it, and leave us a positive review, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, your favorite podcast streaming service, or even on our website at www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com. Well, Christmas comes a day late here at the Afraid of Nothing podcast. But fear not, loyal listeners, we've got a great show. Instead of bringing you Ave Maria, we have Avi Loeb, Harvard astrophysicist, best-selling author of Extraterrestrial and Interstellar, and an all-around good guy, and one of the smartest people on this block in Earth, I think. So it's great to hear what he thinks about what's been happening up in the sky and what we should look forward to in the year ahead, in the decade ahead. And Avi also tells us what is the question he would like to solve, ultimately. So listen in, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone who listens. I hope it was great, and I hope the new year is fantastic. Here's to 2025.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
We are here with a repeat guest, one of my favorite guests. It's his third time on the Afraid of Nothing podcast, and we greatly appreciate it. His name is Avi Loeb, and he's the Baird Professor of Science and Institute Director at Harvard University and the best-selling author of Extraterrestrial and Interstellar. And we'll talk about some of that. The timing is right to talk about what's up in the skies because there's been some crazy things happening lately. So welcome to the show, Avi.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure, Bob.
As I mentioned, this is our third episode together. We first spoke back in early 2021 about your great book, great and somewhat controversial at the time with your colleagues, Extraterrestrial, the first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth. It was about Oumuamua, which was the first alleged interstellar visitor to be spotted in our solar system. So you kind of were on a bunch of shows and talking to a bunch of people about it. In the past couple of years, has anything changed, or are there any updates about Oumuamua?
Yeah, when you say bunch, it's more than 3,000 interviews that I had on podcast, television, radio, and newspapers. And yes, a lot has happened since then. Well, first of all, we discovered with my student at the time, Amir Siraj, an object in a catalog of NASA that collided with Earth a decade ago on January 8th, 2014, and it was moving faster than the escape speed from the solar system. In fact, it was moving faster than 95% of the stars in the vicinity of the sun outside the solar system. 60 kilometers per second. It was traversing a distance in 1 second that a car on a highway passes in 1 hour. And so it was very fast. It also exploded, created a fireball about 20 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean. that is very low in the atmosphere. It meant that the object was tougher in material strength than all other meteors in the NASA catalog, hundreds of them. I was intrigued by that because it could have been some technologically produced object like Voyager or the Tesla Roadster car that Elon Musk launched to space in 2018. And so I decided to lead an expedition to retrieve materials from the crash site of this meteor. Indeed, we went there. The expedition was documented by a Netflix filming crew. There would be a documentary coming out in about a year, in 2025, on Netflix, showing footage from that expedition. And we recovered about 850 tiny molten droplets, meteoritic material, out of which 10% includes a chemical composition that was never identified before from asteroids or comets from the solar system that appeared as meteors that collided with Earth. And it might indicate an origin from outside the solar system, as we suspected, based on the speed of this meteor. And that is exciting because it opens a new frontier in the future of retrieving materials from crash sites of interstellar objects. It's much less expensive. It cost us $1.5 million compared to the billions of dollars you have to spend if you wanted to retrieve the same materials from an interstellar object like Oumuamua that never collided with Earth.
Is this the first time that's been done?
Yes. Well, this is the first big object from outside the solar system that was spotted, in this case by US government satellites. The fireball from this explosion was identified and localized. And we were the first to go after and retrieve materials from the crash site. So in that sense, it's the first. Of course, some scientists try to argue that maybe the data was more uncertain than the US government claims. I was able to, through the White House, receive confirmation from the US Space Command that this meteor indeed came from outside the solar system. They issued a letter to NASA, an official letter in which they confirmed that the 99.999% that the velocity measurement of this object indicated that it's way above the escape speed from the solar system. And other scientists try to argue that we recovered materials such as coal ash. And we checked 60 elements from the periodic table and confirmed that this material is not coal ash. Of course, some people will never believe the evidence because it goes against the argument that all of the objects so far were from the solar system, and also because the properties of this particular object were so unusual.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, now's a good time to be one of your students because there's so much going on. And you recently had a blog post entitled, "Now is the time to search for extraterrestrial visitors," announcing the new Galileo Project Foundation. You want to kind of give us the cliff notes of that article? Actually, the Galileo Project, we talked about that a couple of years ago after the government UAP unclassified report came out. But you've been running that project for a while now, and there's some exciting things happening. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. The project was inaugurated at the end of July 2021, a month after the Director of National Intelligence delivered a report to the US Congress about unidentified aerial or anomalous phenomena. We decided to look at the sky with a new type of observatory that was never constructed before, because astronomers are focusing on a small region of the sky. And here we need to look at the entire sky all the time. And we do it in the infrared, optical band, radio, and audio. And we analyze the data with machine learning software. So it took us a couple of years to identify the components of the observatory, assemble them, then another year to test all the sensors that we're using and calibrate them, and then 6 months or so to start analyzing the data. And we posted a very detailed paper about the commissioning data on 500,000 objects in the sky from the first 5 months of data collection at Harvard University. So this is the first observatory we have. And within a month or so, we're planning to have additional units of the same observatory separated by a few miles so that we can triangulate we can look at an object and figure out its distance, just in the same way that the two eyes that we have allow us to gauge the distance to a predator, and that's what allowed us to survive, of course, as animals with two eyes. And so having multiple units looking at the same object will give us the distance, and from that we can infer the velocity, the actual speed of the object, and acceleration. So these are parameters that could distinguish anomalous objects from aircrafts, drones, balloons, and so forth. All we are seeking is objects that are not familiar, that are different than the ones that we know about. I have no interest in human-made objects like the drones that were identified over New Jersey recently. As soon as I realized that all the data about them, all the information implies that they're human-made, I don't care much about them. I mean, I will let the law enforcement authorities and FBI and intelligence agencies to figure out where these drones came from. I don't really care about human-made objects. I just want to see whether there is 1 in a million objects in the sky that may have arrived from another star that is extraterrestrial. We are currently in the process of building a second observatory in Pennsylvania. We have full funding for that from the Richard King Mellon Foundation. And then a third observatory in Nevada. And we hope that by the summer of 2025, we will have 3 observatories in 3 states that will collect data on a few million objects in the sky every year. That is unprecedented, that so much data will be collected and analyzed using artificial intelligence.
How much of this data that you're getting from things that are in the sky are like debris?
It's a mixed bag. Most of the objects are familiar. They could be birds, they could be airplanes, and they could be leaves or clouds. And I should also say that the essay that you mentioned, I write an essay every couple of days and post it on medium.com. And the one that you refer to is actually related to a foundation that we established that is seeking funding for additional observatories or for the next expedition to the Pacific Ocean. And so we now have the Galileo Project Foundation that is a 501c organization. And in other words, there is no tax on any donation that is given to us through this foundation. And if anyone wants to support our work, we would welcome that very much.
What's the website for that, Avi?
So it's in my essay. I have a link directly to the website. So just look for Avi Loeb at medium.com. And the essay was titled about the Galileo Project Foundation, basically. And just by searching for these keywords, you can find it.
Yeah, I think it was called Now is the Time to Search for Extraterrestrial Visitors, announcing the new Galileo Project Foundation. I think that was the title of the blog.
Thank you. Yes. All of our work is supported by donations. At the moment, we have no funding opportunities from federal origin like NASA or NSF. But I very much hope that this line of research will enter the mainstream of astronomy.
Now, it sounds like a really worthy project. I mean, look, I'd be remiss not to mention the New Jersey drones. And you had actually done an article about that, a blog a couple days ago. It was called New Jersey Drones and Dark Comments. So you had a couple of basic thoughts, but if you could summarize it, but I think what you just said was it's pretty much certain that what we're seeing just above our heads, not like way out into the cosmos, is human-made. And that's something that you don't have an interest in. But I also wonder, what about drones that come up from out of the water or lights that come up out of the water? I don't think they're drones. Has anybody ever asked you about the New Jersey drones or what's going on?
Oh, yeah. I had a lot of emails and text messages, but also several interviews on television like Sky News or ABC from Australia. And I try to clarify that all the information we have, the flight characteristics, indicates that these are human-made drones. And there are 2 possibilities. Either they are U.S. In origin and the civilians or organizations are flying them, which is something that was echoed this morning by the White House. They claim that all of them are American in origin. The alternative is that some of them originated from an adversarial nation. And that should not be surprising because there was the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down at the beginning of February 2023 by the US Air Force. So we know that other nations are trying to spy by flying over the US territory. They're doing it also from satellites. So they could potentially use drone technology for the same purpose. It's quite likely that the intelligence agencies have much more information than is publicly available. So we just don't have access to it. And obviously, the government wants to calm down anxiety within the public. But I don't think there is anything about these drones over New Jersey that indicates an extraterrestrial origin. So from a scientific point of view, I was not intrigued enough to go there and check what these are. I leave it to the government to figure out.
Yeah, and it's just like Elon Musk said that the next war is probably going to be drone warfare. That's the next level.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There is no doubt about it. And that's for two reasons. First, drones are very cheap and small. So you can employ a lot of them. They could be very effective at destroying infrastructure or military equipment, including tanks or other things that are far more expensive. And they don't risk human lives. So I do agree with Elon's vision that the battlefield of the future will mainly be, similar to video games in a way. You will have soldiers operating equipment from a large distance, and drones will be an important component of it.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'd say about it would be there's a couple of hypotheses that I heard. One is that you can only do so much with AI, so you have to do actual training.
Yeah. It's not easy to spot.
Hack, kill, and leave, or
it's not easy to actually identify them because they're small. So in the Galileo project, we could see drones at a distance of a few kilometers, depending on their size, but they behave in a very characteristic ways. It's easy to tell the difference between a drone and an airplane or something else.
Are you able to zoom in on them and see, I don't know, the license plate or whatever, or like in the sky is something you can zoom in? There's a certain power that your telescopes have. Are you able to zoom in on drones too if you were ever asked to do that?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are we all psychic?
What are spirit guides and angels?
What is energy healing?
What's a ghost?
Do I have a soul contract?
What's a soul even?
Hello, Voyagers. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Frank.
And we started Clairvoyaging Podcast when our 5-year-old niece correctly predicted the death of a stranger.
We decided that it was time to learn more about things that can't be easily explained.
Join us as we interview psychics and experts about the basics of esotericism and try to enhance our intuitive abilities.
Come for the development, stay for the underdeveloped jokes.
Clairvoyaging Podcast. Normalize your spiritual journey with us on any podcast platform.
Yeah, in principle, we can. It depends on the distance as to whether we can, how much resolution we get, how many pixels we get on each object. But definitely, yes, we do have a zoom camera that allows us to zoom in on targets of interest. I should say that the data we're getting comes in two categories. One is, objects that we identify and others that we don't identify. So that's statistical work. So we can say which fraction of the objects we can tell what they are and which fraction remains unresolved. And of course, that's in general of interest. As we do triangulation, we'll be able to identify more and more objects. But then there is the possibility that a single object, forgetting about the entire population, we would see a single object that behaves in ways that are completely anomalous, either in terms of its acceleration, in terms of its speed, in terms of the way it looks. If we ever see something like that, that could be a subject of a paper by itself. So This is the type of data that I'm most excited about, the second one.
Yeah, also in that blog, you talked about dark comments, and,
yes.
and that kind of had an impact on Oumuamua. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so recently there were several papers by astronomers, primarily led by Daryl Seligman, an astronomer that I know quite well and I collaborated with. And they identify a class of objects from the solar system that they call dark comets. What do they mean by that? They mean that these objects do not have a visible cometary tail. So why do they call them comets? Well, because they show non-gravitational acceleration. They seem to be propelled, but without showing cometary evaporation. So they call them dark comets. And I think the reason they do that is because they look anomalous. And it's sort of like looking at an animal when you are familiar to dealing with zebras. And then you say, okay, well, this is an animal that does not have stripes like a zebra does. So I will call it an unstriped zebra because I know what zebras are. But we all know that there are lots of animals that fall into that category that have nothing to do with zebras. For example, you can have an elephant that doesn't have any stripes. So calling an elephant an unstriped zebra is misleading. Of course, there are albino zebras that have stripes, but the stripes are fainter, but they still show stripes. That's why we call them zebras. So I think it's completely inappropriate of those experts on comets to call these objects that show non-gravitational acceleration dark comets. Obviously, what they want to do is remove them from the category of anomalous objects that they cannot figure out and just assign to them the property of comets that are familiar. Somehow they get accelerated, but we don't see a cometary tail. So Oumuamua did have those properties. It was propelled, but it showed an acceleration, a non-gravitational acceleration that is somewhere between 150 to 500,000 times bigger than these dark comets. And the question is, suppose these are indeed comets and I boost up their evaporation rate by a factor of up to 500,000, will they remain dark? My answer is probably not. But it's not even clear that they are comets. I think that's a trick, and it shows you how much bias enters into scientific research. It's sort of a way of pushing aside anomalies and trying to associate anomalous entities with familiar entities, things that we know about. That was done many times before in science. For example, the precession of Mercury was not understood 150 years ago, and the claim was, well, it's in violation of Newtonian dynamics, and therefore there must be another planet. There was a suggestion that there should be another planet giving it this precession. And then Einstein came up with his general relativity, and we realized, in fact, there is no planet causing the precession of Mercury. It's actually a result of gravity that Einstein's theory predicted. And also in the context of dark matter, where we don't know what most of the matter in the universe is, the initial assumption of quote-unquote experts on cosmology was to say these are dark objects made of ordinary matter. For example, remnants of stars, like black holes, white dwarfs, neutron stars, things like that we can't see. And then there was an experiment to test that disproved this idea, because even dark objects should gravitationally lens background stars when they pass in front of them. And there was a project looking for those transient brightening events of background stars, and they didn't find them as much as should have been if the dark matter was a stellar remnant. So that was ruled out. And so the lesson from that is, we should not be dissuaded to consider anomalies by what the experts are doing. They're putting a smoke screen. They're giving those objects a label that associates them with something we know about, even though we don't know if they're comets in the case of dark comets. And it's actually an oxymoron to call something a dark comet, because a comet is identified by its coma, and these objects do not show it.
Summarizing that, a dark comet, the thought was most comets, as we know, have a tail, right? And I think a dark comet doesn't have a tail. So it's like invisible outgassing or whatever that propels it through the stratosphere.
Yeah, but we don't know that.
Yeah, it sounds like someone came up with that, but it's rather than them proving it, it's like you are disproving it instead.
Well, what I'm saying is, suppose you imagine, let's say, a light sail in the case of Oumuamua, because the push of Oumuamua was away from the sun.
Yeah.
Or you imagine an object that has a little bit of propulsion, or you imagine some physical process that have nothing to do with outgassing that is giving the object a nudge. In all these cases, we are talking about objects that are not comets. So it's completely inappropriate to call this class of objects dark comets, you should call them anomalous objects that show non-gravitational acceleration.
Yeah. You actually write these quite often. I found several interesting ones. Another one that you did was about you were at a dinner party with friends, and you were asked, what's the most exciting development that you foresee in the coming decade? And I'd like you to elaborate on your answer. It was AI, but it had multiple meanings.
Right. For me, AI has two possible meanings. One is artificial intelligence, that's the conventional meaning. And the second is alien intelligence. And as far as I'm concerned, the question is which one will arrive first or we will notice first on Earth? And artificial intelligence might do so in the coming decade. It might become more intelligent than humans, superhuman intelligence. And that's our technological kid. And we tend to think that we can align the computer, the machine, with the way we think, which is sort of like educating a kid with the guiding principles that we want that kid to behave with when it becomes independent. But to me, it sounds like putting lipstick on a pig, because the computer is a machine made of silicon chips, not flesh and blood. And once it becomes more intelligent than we are, it will show us one face, the face that we like to see. But then there could be other branches of its operation that are hidden from us and would manipulate us in ways that would accomplish other interests that are not ours. I really think that could become a reality, and that's sort of a different type of intelligence. I mean, we are used to working with technological equipment that is dumber than us. I mean, we drive a car. The car is not smarter than us, and we feel good about it because it does what we want it to do. And I think we are up to a psychological shock once we will start operating AI systems that are smarter than us. This will be the first time in history where, the system will manipulate us instead of us manipulating the system. And so that would give a lot of frustration to people. And we are not really ready for that, but it may very well happen because of all the benefits that come with the development of artificial intelligence. And then the same situation may happen with alien intelligence. If we find a gadget that was manufactured by another civilization that was much more advanced than we are, it may have artificial or some alien intelligence associated with it. That could also teach us some humility because it may be superhuman in its abilities. And the question is which type of AI will arrive first. And one thing is clear, that Martin Buber was a philosopher that about a century ago argued that humans have various types of interactions. There is interaction with objects, and there is a human interaction. But of course, he lived before the computer revolution, and today we would add to that human AI as an interaction and AI as an interaction. And I would also add the interaction with alien intelligence. That adds another layer of complexity to the future that is awaiting us.
I think if you look at both of those, artificial intelligence, like the big bang for that is the human mind, human programming. So that would have limitations, even though it could accelerate and expand outwards and do so much more. While alien intelligence, I think, would have much more unlimited opportunity.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a question of time, really. And we developed quantum mechanics, we discovered it just a century ago. So most of modern science and technology came out of that. All the gadgets that we use right now are based on quantum mechanics. And just think about, instead of having 1 century, having a millennium of modern science or 1,000,000 years of modern science. We cannot really anticipate what will be discovered. All we know is that there are fundamental questions to which we don't have a good answer right now. For example, how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity in a theory that is predictive. And once we have that, for example, we'll be able to figure out what happened before the Big Bang. Currently, we don't know. We will also be able to figure out what happens inside the black hole. Currently, we don't know because Einstein's theory of gravity breaks down in these so-called singularities, the singularity of the Big Bang or the singularity at the center of a black hole. We don't have a theory that predicts what really happens. But if we had such a theory, then if we know what happened before the Big Bang, we would have a recipe for what were the ingredients that allowed our universe to be born. And, if you have a recipe for a cake that includes the ingredients and the way they were put together in order to make a cake, you can bake a cake. So just think about a future where a civilization that is sufficiently advanced, that has a theory of quantum gravity, knows how to make a baby universe. And at that point, that civilization could potentially apply for the job of God. Because if you ask what is the fundamental requirement for, in a job advertisement of God, you should be able to create a universe. Okay, and if science evolves to the point where we can know the recipe for making a baby universe, we're pretty much close to being God or applying to the job of God. At that point, we probably would be able also to create life and, all the things that are considered miracles in religious texts.
So God is definitely a mathematician, if whoever he is or whoever she is.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Really? Because I think, isn't math kind of underpinning everything that we see out there, or no? What do you think?
But mathematics offers many more possibilities than those that are realized in nature. So God, whoever created our universe had to be very picky. Just think about an artist. An artist has the colors and the canvas, okay? And the painter can put the colors on the canvas in a huge number of ways. There are many, many different ways of putting the colors on the canvas. And at the end, you end up with one painting. Of course, mathematically speaking, there could have been many, many paintings, and mathematics can deal with the statistics of paintings of different types and so forth. But for me as a physicist, as someone that is interested in reality, I really want to understand why this painting, why do we have this universe? Why do we have these characteristics? And mathematics cannot address that because it's only one out of many possibilities. It's really interesting to figure out why things were chosen to be this way, or what are the rules that dictate the universe as we see it.
Now, did you ever have a thought on the observable universe? Do we create the universe with what we see, or is it the other way around, that universe creates us?
Oh no! Obviously, it's not our mind that created the universe. I mean, our mind creates things like virtual reality. The metaverse. When you put goggles on your head and you follow Mark Zuckerberg and you go to the metaverse, and you can be a celebrity there. You can own a home that is extremely expensive. You can also do the same without goggles. You can just take recreational drugs and feel very good about yourself. But that is not the physical reality that we all share. Okay, and so there are these virtual realities, and we often prefer to be in them simply because they are more flattering to our ego. They're making us happy. The actual physical reality that we all share is under no contract to make us happy. We would have been happier if we were at the center of the universe. That's what the Vatican argued when Nicolaus Copernicus suggested, no, the sun is at the center of the solar system. The Vatican would have been happier if indeed the Earth or us were at the center of the universe, but that's not the case. Now, you can say, I don't want to listen to those facts. And in fact, until 1992, the Vatican did not admit that Galileo Galilei was right and Nicolaus Copernicus were right. But 20 years after the first humans visited the moon, they admitted, 1992, that is the reality we live in. And why is it important to figure out reality if it makes us unhappy sometimes? It's because it allows us to adapt to it. If we have the wrong ideas, once we figure out that we are wrong, then we correct ourselves and we take advantage of what we learned. So we can reach Mars because we understand that Mars does not revolve around the Earth. If we were to continue to believe the Earth is at the center of the universe, we would shoot rockets that would never get to Mars.
What is the biggest challenge or the biggest question that you're addressing as a theoretical physicist? Is it just how everything works, the meaning of life? What is the biggest challenge that you're trying to address in your career?
Well, I'm hoping to address questions that can be answered by collecting evidence, and one of them is, of course, what is the universe made of? As I mentioned, we don't know what 85% of the matter in the universe is, and it's called dark matter simply for the lack of any knowledge of what it's made of. What is this substance? And I would like to know that. But if I had one question to ask an alien scientist, it would be what happened before the Big Bang. That to me encapsulates the lack of knowledge of quantum gravity. It represents our cosmic roots. It could unify science and religion. So this is the question I'm most curious about. And until we understand quantum gravity, we will not have a good answer for that. Of course, there are other questions. Obviously, is there someone smarter than us, a smarter kid on our cosmic block? So that's a question I'm trying to address with the Galileo project. The other thing, which is more local, is how to bring humanity to invest more in space exploration rather than in conflicts on the rock that we were born on. There is so much real estate out there. We probably do not live in the best house on the street. We are probably not the smartest on the street. And we keep investing money in conflicts, territories on this rock. And that's very narrow-minded. So John Lennon wrote the song, "Imagine All the People Living in Peace." I'm not that naive. I don't think that by singing we will bring people together. I think the one thing that can change us is a shock. So shock therapy, what would bring this shock? It's if we find evidence for a neighbor, a partner out there. Suddenly the sky will not look dark anymore because we would realize that it's not just elementary particles that are filling up space. There is someone else out there. And so it will change the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about the universe. It will not be lonely. It will not be meaningless, pointless. Suddenly we would realize there is someone else out there. And moreover, if it's a smarter someone, then we might want to imitate that someone. If they arrive to us, we might want to arrive to their home and see what's going on there. And it will change the sense of priorities that we have. And my hope is that it will bring people together because when you realize that there is someone else far away, it gives a new perspective. And then you realize that we are all in the same boat here on Earth, all of us humans. And there is someone more powerful than we are. So why don't we come together? In the tradition of religions, that's exactly the idea behind suggesting that God exists, because then the people who believe in that God realize that they are not the most powerful. Otherwise, they have hubris. Humans tend to think highly of themselves, to be proud, to have an ego. And my point is, if we find an extraterrestrial partner, it will give us a sense of modesty that is really missing for the secular society or culture that we live in.
So that's actually a great place to end, but I have a couple other quick things. One is just curiosity. You were on, over 3,000 interviews, one of them with a Joe Rogan podcast. What was it like being a guest on his podcast?
I felt that he's very respectful and curious and open-minded and sincere. So it was not only him. I spoke most recently with Sean Ryan for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and also with Lex Friedman.
Uh-huh.
And there was a TED Talk that was selected as among the top 5 in 2024, just a couple of weeks ago. So I recommend if anyone wants an 18-minute summary of the latest in my research, just check out the recent TED Talk that was publicized in July 2024.
Is that on your website, Avi, or should I
No,
just
you
Google?
can just Google it and you will find it. I should say that there is a huge amount of public attention to this research. And I attended a conference just a month ago. And after my talk, I wanted to go to the men's room. And on the way, every few feet, someone would stop me and ask for a selfie. And when I got to the men's room, there was a guy that was washing his hands. And he said, "Are you Avi Loeb?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, that's amazing because it feels just like standing next to Taylor Swift."
How did that make you feel?
That was strange because I'm not an entertainer. In an email recently, someone said, "Oh, you are speaking about the drones in New Jersey like a boring scientist." And I said, "Just trying to tell you what I think. I'm not an entertainer. I'm not trying to entertain you by saying that there's something else. I'm just telling you what I think."
Well, I take comfort that intellectuals are becoming celebrities now, which I think podcasting is a big part of that because you have more than a 2-minute conversation.
That's probably true. Yeah. And, when I go to a restaurant with my wife, very often the waiter recognizes me. So these are things I've never experienced before, but I don't care much about because I don't have any footprint on social media. I don't care how many likes I get. I just want to do the right thing by following common sense.
Well, I got to tell you, I appreciate you taking the time with, I'm not Joe Rogan or any of those guys, but you've taken time with me. This is the third time. I greatly appreciate it. Is there anything before you head off? I think you're heading off for the holidays today or tomorrow. Is there anything that you would like to talk about or promote that, your books, Interstellar or Extraterrestrial or anything else that you would like people to know about, to find out more about you and what you're doing?
The main thing I would mention is the essays that I post every couple of days on medium.com and the Netflix documentary that will come out in a year or so in 2025. And there are always new things coming up. In a few months, I'm supposed to receive 2 sculptures of Galileo Galilei that will be put in my office. Nice. And they were produced by one of the most accomplished sculptors in the US, Greg Wyatt. And that is a great testimony to the inspiration that this research gives artists and people in general.
Well, we appreciate your being present with us and always keeping an eye in the sky. I hope you have a wonderful holiday, Avi, and we look forward to more great things for you in 2025. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit afraidofnothingpodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's afraidofnothingpodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode, and the world will know how swell you are.